Welcome everybody to today's webinar on leading during turbulent times and focusing on what you can control. As we get started, I want to make sure and thank MailChimp and Envision. They have been instrumental to the Bureau being able to keep moving forward. They care so much about this community and care so much about all of the people in it. So thanks to MailChimp and Envision. And also thanks to Navigate the Journey and Tracy and Zach and Tom. They are the Bureau's go-to source for any type of leadership development, definitely EOS implementation. Basically, they can get your team in a groove. Now, sometimes they're outside forces when you might have been in a groove, but now the world is kind of coming in on you. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So Tracy Barrett, tell us how to lead during turbulent times.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Carl, first and foremost. We love the Bureau, we love the Bureau community, and we're so grateful to be talking to everybody today during this difficult time. Just so you know who's on the webinar with you from Navigate the Journey and who's going to be popping in during Q&A is going to be, well, Tom Barrett, who's our certified EOS implementer. He's all things strategy and execution. And we have Zach, who is all things people, culture, and HR. So as I go through kind of our 4 points that we want you guys to focus on today as far as leading through turbulent times, if you have some questions that come up and you're thinking about how do you execute that point, or thinking about this from through an EOS standpoint or strategic standpoint, or you have HR issues that are just really eating at you, go ahead and throw those questions into Q&A. And at the end of this, Carl and I and Zach and Tom are going to pop in, and we're going to answer as many questions as we possibly can, because we want to make sure you guys feel supported as you exit this webinar. So what we're going to talk about today is 4 key things to focus on as a leader to weather these current times. And let's just face it, we are all weathering this crisis. It's surreal, it's unbelievable, but it's very real. And regardless of how big your company is, how many employees you have, what your role is, if you're a leader and you consider yourself a leader, you're facing some challenging times. And we don't even know what might lie ahead, right? So everybody's in a different stage of this right now. So what we're going to focus on today is what we believe you guys as leaders, as owners of your companies can control. What we see is that most leaders actually, they don't fear change. Usually most leaders can roll with the punches. What they fear is losing control. And that's what we're all experiencing right now, is a little loss of control and a little ambiguity about what's going to happen next. So over the next few minutes, as we kind of go over these 4 key things, first and foremost, I just want you to take a deep breath. As leaders, I feel like we're doing a lot of coaching, a lot of support calls right now. And one of the first things we have to say is just take a breath. Like, our anxiety can wreak havoc on the way we lead. So this is going to be an opportunity for you guys to just reset your psyche. You've been hearing a lot of different webinars and podcasts and things with such great advice on action steps to talk about. We're going to talk about a few action steps, but first, you cannot be a good leader. You can't make good decisions. You can't execute properly if you don't have your head screwed on straight. So we really want to get you in the right mindset and make sure you're properly focused. That anxiety can take a toll on your mental and physical self. So that's where we're going to go today. Focus on those 4 points and then jump into Q&A. So we know that we are trying to balance this concern for our people and for our business, and it's stretching our leadership skills to the max. So what I'm here to tell you today is you don't need any superhuman, extra special leadership skills. You just need to hone those you have and be reminded of where you need to pull those skills from. So as we wrestle and reconcile with this major event in our lives, it's going to influence how we lead. And I know this is going to sound scary, but how you lead during this time is how you're going to be remembered for a really long time to come. And people are watching us. And so we need to look at this crisis as a great teacher for us today. So in times of crisis, there's 2 directions that human nature can go in. We can either go in fear, helplessness, feeling like a victim, or we can go in self-actualization and engagement. So the best leaders are going to come out of this crisis with much greater clarity, because they've embraced that self-actualization. They've embraced going after clarity about their business, about their people, their teams, their clients, what works, what doesn't work, even about themselves. So we want to go into the rest of 2020 with that mentality, to be in search of that clarity, right? To open your minds and eyes to learning, to be engaged, and to self-actualize. One of my favorite examples of learning through a crisis is James Stockdale and the Stockdale paradox. If you've ever read Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, well, if you haven't, I can't even believe that you haven't, but go out and get it immediately and read it. But he's the one who made this kind of Stockdale paradox kind of famous through looking at Jim Stockdale, who was a prisoner of war for over 7 years in Vietnam. And during this like awful time, he was repeatedly tortured, had no reason to believe that he was going to come out alive. But he found a way to embrace his reality by looking at both the harshness of a situation, but he balanced it with healthy optimism. And when he was asked, like, how did you deal with everything and you didn't know how the end of the story was going to turn out? And he just said, I never lost faith in the end of the story. I never doubted that I would get out. But I never also doubted that I would prevail in the end. So when asked, like, what about the people who didn't get out, the people who actually died in that prison with him? He said, they were the extreme optimists, those that had unrealistic expectations, like the ones who said, we're going to get out by Christmas. Christmas came, didn't get out. We're going to get out by Easter. Easter came, didn't get out. And those people kind of died of a broken heart. And so I love that that kind of complex way of looking at your situation and saying, like, look, I need to face the brutal facts. I need to understand what's really going on here, not just for myself, but for my clients. But I also need to have this healthy optimism, not this like crazy extreme optimism, but a healthy optimism that, you know what, we're going to get through this. I don't know when it's going to end. I don't know what it's going to look like at the other side, but we're going to get through this. And that is going to do wonders for your mentality, but also for your team. Also, we need to understand that this is a marathon, not a sprint. Another thing that might be hard for us to deal with right now, but I read this great quote about the current crisis from this professor at the University of Toronto. And she said, understand that this is a marathon. If you sprint at the beginning, you will vomit on your shoes by the end of the month. Emotionally prepare for the crisis to continue 12 to 18 months, followed by a slow recovery. And if it ends sooner, be pleasantly surprised. But right now, work towards establishing your serenity, your productivity, and your wellness under sustained disaster conditions. So we have to pace ourselves. We have to prepare for a new reality, right? So again, take a deep breath, just settle in for this new reality, this new environment, and know that this is going to be a bit of a marathon. Hopefully it's going to end sooner than we think, but on the other side, there is going to be a new normal that we as leaders need to know how to navigate. But here's the good news, especially for the Bureau community, is that you are creative. And the type of leaders that are best positioned to get through this storm are those that are creative. I mean, your wonderful, amazing, curious, innovative, energetic brain is waiting for you. You just got to push past that fear, that ambiguity, that uncertainty to get to that conceiver brain that I know you all have, and start conceiving of how you can best position yourself, the needs that you can serve of your clients, how you can best get your business through this other side, not just to survive, but to thrive. And if I believe in any group of people more, man, do I believe in the Bureau community to be able to come out the other side really, really thriving. So step one, what do we want to focus on? You got to focus on your leadership. Now more than ever, like I said before, people are watching you. People are looking for you. Even our families are looking to us to show up as good leaders and lead well. You need to model the way as a leader. So the first step to good leadership is really to put the oxygen mask on yourself first. You've got to focus on that internal before you can focus on the external. So, I've been telling my clients, like, let go of who you were yesterday. Like, we've got to focus on who we need to be today. We've got to become self-directed, self-motivated. We got to be present, evaluate our emotions. If you know anything about me and you've heard me speak before, you know that I love to talk about emotional intelligence. It is the most important skill for you to have right now. It is really emotional intelligence, not IQ, but EQ, is your ability to understand and manage your own emotions as well as those around you. So I'm going to say that again. You need to understand and manage your own emotions as well as those around you. So emotions are good. They're fine, right? They're the way we are created. It's actually what you do with those emotions, how you act upon those emotions that are key, right? And so we need to really understand and see ourselves and tap into where our emotions are today. If you feel like this is a weak spot for you, you definitely want to do some work on this as soon as possible. Because if you feel like your emotions aren't good, you're filled with fear or anxiety, the next step is you got to rewrite that script in your head. No one talks to you more than you. So you got to give yourself a new dialogue and fuse your script with that healthy optimism that we talked about that will help you face those brutal facts with your team. Next, be okay that you don't have all the answers. I know this is scary as a leader. Man, if anything feeds into our imposter syndrome more, it's ambiguity and not having all the answers. But let that go. Like, it's okay to say to your team, like, I don't have it all figured out, but let's figure it out together. Let's come together and really wrestle through these problems. Then you just are going to be okay with being vulnerable once you are able to take that step and say that out loud. And it's going to be a new level of connection and freedom with your team. So your people, they really want to know that you can relate and that they're not alone in their concerns. And so your vulnerability is going to actually breed trust. Also have a team outside your team. Like I've always said, with transparency, there's a little bit of a balance here. So some things you can say, a lot of things you can say in front of your team, especially when you're confronting brutal facts, but have a team outside your team. Have that best friend, coach, therapist, consultant, fellow bureau community. Man, there's nothing better than that bureau Slack to be able to interact on, where you can really get some outside opinions and perspective, and especially honesty to make sure you are looking at things the right way. And then lastly, we've been telling people, you got to disconnect. If you're new to working remotely, one of the hardest things I found, working from home, I had been in an office for 22 years. You come home and starting your day and ending your day is tough. Like making sure you start your day at the proper time and get into a routine, and then disconnect completely, shut down, put things away, work out, meditate. You got to take care of yourself. And can we all just take a big old media news diet as well? I think we're all overeating right now with the media, and it's affecting our psyche. And when you get tired and spent, your EQ will be affected. You will start to have some pretty bad emotional reactions, right? So now that your head's in the right space, you can start focusing externally. So what exactly does your team need from you? So this Gallup Media Analytics report I just read determined that there are 4 universal needs that an employee needs from their leader, especially urgent during a crisis. So they're looking for trust, compassion, stability, and hope. So if you can write those 4 words and put them on your desk as a daily reminder of how you need to be showing up and what your needs are of your employees and your teammates, it's going to be super helpful for you. So how you lead will determine if your people will actually trust you and therefore trust each other, right? It starts at the top. Your motives, if your motives are good, that's going to drive your empathy and help you show that great compassion that they need to see. And your plan forward, your resilience to kind of get through the other side is going to provide that stability that they really want. And that healthy optimism we talked about before is going to provide hope. So there's the formula there. And especially I want to point out that empathy and resilience, right? Those are really the key essential leadership muscles that need to be exercised. I know we all have it in us. And with those 2 traits, you can meet those 4 needs. So when it comes to empathy, you got to demonstrate your concern for the real fears that you have, but also the fears your people have, your clients have, your customers are experiencing. And even if you don't have the answers to all of their questions, don't let that keep you from listening to them and empathizing with their fears. So, one of the things I've been really talking to a couple of my clients about is this: even if you're used to working from home, like say your team has completely been remote, which I know for a lot of bureau agencies, that's the case. This isn't normal remote working, right? Especially for parents. We have a lot of young kids wandering around the house. And so it's really a time for us to kind of up our empathy when it comes to working parents at home. And one of the reasons I love Jimmy Fallon is that he's doing the Tonight Show with his kid crawling all over his back. And that's a reminder, like, that's what's happening across America, right? And, I was talking to a leader the other day who is struggling with this. Like, they're having a business conversation and the kid's crawling on the top of their project manager's lap. And like, it's hard to be like, can you not just put the kid away? Well, no, we can't put the kid away, right? Like, you don't just put them in a closet and shut the door. Like, they need us, and it's really hard. So show compassion, because these working parents feel so vulnerable right now. They feel like their job's in jeopardy. They feel like you might not see them at 100%. So tell them it's okay. Show them you trust them. Have some compassion. And boy, they're going to remember again that you showed up that way for them, because this is temporary. It's not always going to be this way. And so now's the time to show up the right way with your empathy. And resilience is the other side of the coin, right? Your ability to sustain yourself, to persevere, to not give up. Your team is really looking for that not give up attitude. And you have to connect that to purpose. You remember the mission of your company, why you started, and hang on to that. So your resilience is going to propel your team forward. It's going to show them that you have a plan, and that will give them great peace and great stability. So your character is going to drive your empathy, and your ambition is going to drive your resilience. So who you are is how you will lead. And I think that's really important to us to remember, is to do those character checks. So dig deep and hone your leadership skills. Second is to focus on communication. Actually, I'm going to say over communicate. Another thing that I like to say often: boy, leaders think that they are communicating, actually think they're over communicating when they're not. Like, I have yet to survey a team where the team survey comes back like, wow, my leader really communicates too much. That has yet to happen. So I'm hoping that you'll prove me wrong one day. But just remember, be visible. This isn't a time, I know you feel like you want to just put head down, pen to paper, and figure out your business situation. There's time for that, but don't cocoon. Man, you really need to be visible. Have a clear plan of action. Like I said before, you need to be communicating that you have someplace to go. The company's going someplace, you're going to get there. And I know you don't have all the details of that worked out, but you want to be communicating where you think we're headed. Focus on relationships. Communicate to those relationships. We're talking one-on-one conversations. This is with your teammates and your people. Pick up the phone, send an email out, touch base with people. This is also with your clients. Now is the time to heighten your empathy for your clients and just say, hey, I'm here for you. And I really, want to make sure you're doing okay, because times are tough. How's your family? Just make sure you are really focusing on those relationships. And I guarantee you, if you just do that over the next couple of months, it will strengthen your business in the end. Send updates often, even if you don't have anything to update on. Have those company meetings like you're used to having. Be as transparent as possible. This goes back to the brutal facts. I like to tell people that your team can handle the brutal facts. They want to hear you actually say them out loud. That gives them comfort, because they realize that you have a full picture. You're not sticking your head in the sand. And they are really relying on you to make sure that you're facing all of those brutal facts. They can handle it. So share some of those brutal facts with them, but remember to balance it with some healthy optimism. Remind people of progress, even if it's baby steps that you're taking. Your team needs to hear that you're making them, and recognize your team for those efforts that they are having success with right now. Don't do all the talking. We really want you to listen. People need to be heard. They need to feel connected to you. It eases their anxiety. And lastly, one of the best antidotes to anxiety is gratitude. I know that you probably have heard this before, but I am going to ask you to even go in your calendar and actually put times throughout the week where you express gratitude, where you stop and look at what you guys have. I mean, all of us are in a very fortunate situation because of the country that we live in. And really, that's at the very least, right? But just make sure that we are being grateful for our teammates, for our clients, for our friendships, for our family, and express that gratitude. It really is an antidote to anxiety. So last thing I'll leave you with on this point is this George Bernard Shaw quote, which is the single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it's taken place. So again, you're not over communicating. Trust me, communicate. Third step, focus on your key business levers. I know you guys have heard a lot about this. I know, our great friends at Summit have given some great advice, and we are behind all of those things. We really, really believe that you've got to narrow it down. Some business owners are having a hard time. They've got this ginormous list, or they feel like they're out of control, but just narrow down the list to the things that you can control in your business. First and foremost is, I know a lot of people will go into this like sales mode and start looking at the pipeline and start getting very nervous about the pipeline. But we want you to focus on value, not selling. That is a very, very important thing to remember. Right now is really probably not the time to be hitting the pavement and trying to find new clients. It's not going to work. You need to focus on your current client base and create value for them, even if just your value is being there for them, being a sounding board, being a place for them to think about the best opportunities that lie ahead. And for some of us, that might mean that we are giving away some services, or we are giving away our time at the very least to just hear them and to sit with them and to help them understand what they're going through. Again, like I said before, relationships will pay off in the end. So don't get overly concerned about having those conversations and digging deep, but there are opportunities out there, and we'll talk about those in a minute. Create that 3-month forecast. You need to get behind your numbers, understand your different revenue scenarios now, even if your business has actually seen an uptick. In good times, we want our clients to do different revenue scenarios, because the last thing you want to do is be putting those scenarios into action when you're really in a bad way. So we really like you to think about the different scenarios that could happen down the road. Plan to conserve cash. I know that Summit talks about this as well. Go through your budget, figure out how you can save now. If you are working in a certain department or you're closer to the front lines than maybe the leadership team is, you can help in this process too. Do strategic planning for shorter amounts of time. We've been doing this. We've definitely have pivoted from planning out through all the way through 2020 and 2021. We've been doing 30, 60, 90-day windows instead of long periods of time. And that has been super helpful for owners, because they felt like they have control over that, and they're really able to think through just these shorter windows of time. So really think about just kind of honing it in. Keep your meeting rhythms. Don't stop meeting just because you've gone remote. You really want to make sure you're still having those tactical meetings, those strategic meetings, those project meetings. But I'm going to balance that also with, don't start adding meetings to the schedule just because you're feeling a little out of control. You really want to make sure that people still have time to work, to dig in, to breathe. But we want to make sure that we're still keeping that regular meeting rhythm going. It's just that we're effective and efficient, right? New to IDS, this is a EOS term, which is identify, discuss, and solve. And so we keep reminding people everything you're dealing with is an issue. So you got to like hone in on what the root problem is, and really, really identify what the root problem is with your team. That's going to take the longest amount of time. Then you're going to discuss and solve it together, but break it down into those little chunks, right? And then short lists each day. I had like such a fun coaching call with an owner last week who was like, I had like a list of 25 things. And by the end of the day, I realized I did nothing, because just overwhelmed by that huge list. And you know what? If you get 3 things done today, that's great. So just focus on that short list, just tackle 3 things, and you will feel like you've had an effective day. One of the hardest realities and exercises we've had to do with companies is facing their staff and whether they can keep all of their staff. It's just a brutal fact of the crisis that we're all going through. So we just, we take them back to the accountability chart, another EOS term, which is really just your org chart, but it's the seats on the bus and what the responsibilities are against each of those seats, and really taking your forecasting and taking your accountability chart and starting to put scenarios together. And we've been doing a process called reverse accountability chart, which is just that. And again, this is so you can make those decisions with a clear mind if you have to get there. We hope you don't. We hope we don't have to pull the trigger on getting rid of any staff, but we need to figure out these scenarios for the rest of 2020. So that's an exercise that is worth going through now. So also remember that once you've gained clarity on what you can control, you have to set clear expectations. So you're definitely pointing people to the vision of where we're going, and you want to tell people exactly what they should be doing right now. Your team is longing for that, but then you want to remember to hold them accountable. Clarity is kind. So give them those expectations, but we still need to be holding our employees accountable. And this has been a tricky thing for people because they're like, it's hard, it's bad time. Can I still have these tough conversations? Yes, you can. But you want to also balance it with trusting them. And that's why I have Patrick Lencioni's model up here, is trust is the foundation. What we're also finding is that some owners are micromanaging. And that sort of crisis mode puts them in this micromanage mode where they're not trusting their employees as much as they used to. This definitely happens if you're not used to working remotely as well. So find that balance. We want to hold each other accountable during this crisis time, but we also need to trust each other and not over micromanage. Owners can get fixated on losses and those revenue scenarios and all those things we talked about, which are necessary, but you also have to leave space and time to pivot and talk about the opportunities that are out there. And I'm not talking about being opportunistic, right? And going and selling. I'm talking about how can we embrace the new normal and what opportunities exist for our business and what opportunities do we think exist for our clients, right? So leaders can actually see what will be different from this point forward, right? So I want you to tap back into that conceiver mind. And our world is different, right? Our team's needs have shifted, our clients' needs have shifted, and we have to be aware of the new normal around us. And this is one of the, if we're looking for bright spots and silver linings of the experiences we're having with our clients, it's sitting down and saying, what new ideas, what new tools, what new processes, what new resources are needed out there now for us as a company, but also for our clients? And can we tap into that and really, stretch ourselves in our thinking? So ask the right questions as a team. What's changed? What's next? What's better? Get the whole team involved in this. This is the fun part of really making sure we can thrive on the other side of it. Put yourself in the future and ask yourself, what's going to be needed then? The way that we've been always doing things around here, is that the way that still makes sense? And educate yourself, be an active learner. We have been pulling all of our different industries with our clients that we're working with and really trying to educate ourselves. What's happening? What are the trends? What are we seeing consumer-wise within those industries to help to have great ideation and help to be very creative in thinking about how we can service those clients best. So there's lots of different business levers, but narrow them down on what's important right now: value, relationship, and having your scenarios set and looking for those opportunities. That's key. Lastly, I'm just going to say, and very importantly, is focus on your culture. Right now, we pretty much see that either your culture is going to become more cohesive during this difficult time, or they're going to drift apart. And we need to preserve our culture. And hopefully you went into this crisis with a good culture. Any time you've spent in building that culture, you should be reaping the benefits of that right now. But there are still some things that you can do to even strengthen it even more. Help your team pivot to this new environment. it's a new normal for them and how they're relating to each other. So you need to foster that environment, use technology wisely. If anybody knows how to use technology, it's this community. So, make sure you've got that Slack going, but are there other platforms that you could be experimenting with? Get creative. I have been asking all my clients, what are some of the fun things you're doing in this remote environment? And the virtual happy hours, like Thursday, 4 o'clock. I had one team that was doing so many people on the team would do 2 truths and a lie. And it was so fun. They were like completely bonding with each other. I have another team that's doing a kids happy hour where the parents are inviting their kids in. And so you get to see a little bit into their life and meet their kid. And like everybody had one question for each kid. And it's just a fun way to just get creative and really become more cohesive during this time. And it helps to double down on that trust, because trust is built by knowing each other. So getting to know each other more, knowing those things about ourselves, our most embarrassing moment was another game I heard about, that fosters trust. And lastly, allow for growth and development. We're not commuting. We're not hanging out at the water cooler talking about a bunch of stuff. So we should have some time that we can build in to encourage our teams to grow and development. This goes back to the self-actualization, right? So one thing that we always do is DISC. So you can have people do a DISC profile. Some people do Enneagram, learning more about themselves, sharing those findings with each other. One tool, if you guys have done DISC, I'm going to just show you this chart because I just think it's gold, right? If you've done DISC and you know your DISC style, this chart is something you should print out or share on your Slack channel. This is how each style reacts when under stress. So look at your style. These can be your tendencies that show up when you're stressed. And it's good to know it about ourselves so that we know how we're reacting. Like, ooh, there I'm going again. I'm being a little impatient. Or we can see it in other people, right? Because sometimes we get confused, like, why are they overreacting? Why are they underreacting? Why are they so pushing back against this? Like, this is so unusual. They don't typically do this in the office. But now we're seeing, oh, this is how their personality tends to react in a stressful situation. So just one example of so many tools out there that you can pull out and really learn from each other and share with each other. Lastly, your core values. I'm a big core values junkie. So dust them off if you're not using them right now, but some of your weekly meetings could be, or even your virtual happy hours can be, you just pull out one core value and you talk about that. You say how somebody, definitely exhibited it that week. So there's lots of things that you can do, but those core values really are your riverbanks. So don't forget about them. And lastly, last thing I'm going to say is, this great quote from Jim Rohn, who's a renowned entrepreneur and he's a great author, but he said, it's not what happens, it's what you do that determines your future. And so we can't control what's happening, unless one of you has a cure for coronavirus, which then you don't even need to be on this because you're a multimillionaire. But we can't control what's happening out there, but we can control what we do. We can control how we react. We can control how we lead and influence, and we can control the choices we make for our team. So I'm just going to leave you with that. I'm hoping that you guys have some questions for us. But before that, I just want to say, look, we're here for you, Bureau community. There's not a community that we love more. And if you are part of this webinar and hopefully we're going to answer some of your questions here, but if you just are like, I've got a private situation I just want to talk to you about, or I don't know how to handle this, or I need to, understand how to execute upon my strategy in this new environment, just reach out to us. We're here for you, free coaching call, no problem. So we just want to encourage you to do that. So I'm going to have Tom and Zach hop back in, and
There they are.
do we have some questions?
Well, first, thank you, Tracy. While you were talking, I thought my head was going to fall off. I was nodding so violently. Yes, I totally. Ugh. And I think over the past few weeks, we've all been so heads down, so worried about what we do and not so much how we do it. And so I think a lot of the things you just shared are really important. So we had quite a few questions come in ahead of time And I'm just going to start with those. And for everybody who's watching, definitely please use the Q&A and let us know anything you have, or you can follow up with me after and I can get you in touch with Tracy and the rest of the team. But let's start off here. This was a little bit long. I work for a fairly small company, 30 plus employees across the country, and I normally do check-ins with our junior staff every 2 to 4 weeks, depending on how long they've worked for the company. Normal agenda is to see how they are doing, help them work through anything interpersonal with colleagues or clients, talk about workload, etc., without necessarily discussing the day-to-day client work. We've been discussing internally what the best approach is to this kind of softer touch meeting now that we're all remote. Should we stick with the regular schedule? Should we be meeting with folks more often, but for shorter amounts of time to keep the connection intact while we're virtual? Or is it okay to have a different schedule and plan for different employees depending on their work from home situations? For example, one colleague is working from her parents' apartment in Manhattan. So should they try to keep doing what they've been doing, or should they be flexible now that they're all distributed?
Zach, do you want to start with that? Because I know you work with a lot of distributed teams.
Yeah, I mean, I would say well, first I'll say don't try to over meeting. I think that that's a tendency, like during crisis, we want to like overreact. And, Tracy just talked about micromanaging. We got to be careful about that. But I think as much as you can keep normal, that's a great thing. We're seeing a huge shift. Obviously, your one-on-ones are probably not too, future development focused. It's really caring for your team members, helping them grapple with reality as it is today. But I think more than ever, they need to know that you're there for them. They need to know that you're there to support them. And I think check-ins are more important now than they have ever been. I'm a huge advocate for them. But I would say as much as you can keep your one-on-ones intact, keep them intact. One other thing that I did when I was managing a lot of people was I had office hours. I try to do it every day, but if you can keep them, think back to college. You had a professor who had office hours from 8 to 10 or 8 to noon on Thursdays. I'm seeing a lot of leaders do that, just because they know that they're needing to help problem solve and block and tackle. So in addition to that, give your team members, knowing that you're there for them, and they can come no matter the question, no matter the situation. You've got blocks of time in your schedule throughout the week when they can come to you for advice or wisdom or just to listen to what they're going through.
And one thing I'll just add to that, because I think that the person said that they typically do 2 to 4 weeks for those check-ins. I would definitely, that's an eternity right now, I feel like, during this crisis. So I would, in normal circumstances, that makes sense. But in this circumstance, I don't. So I would definitely have them more frequently. Especially because it's junior staff, and junior staff, at least I'm getting the vibe that they're feeling more vulnerable. Like they're feeling like, oh, am I going to be the one that's cut, or how am I going to survive this? So just put that extra touch of care when you're dealing with them. I think it's going to go a long way.
Yeah, I'm going to add one other thing. So with the question, I know the person said it was like a 30-person shop, and it kind of sounded like maybe the person who submitted the question was doing all the check-ins. And so if that is the case, that's probably just like too many direct reports. Mm-hmm. So at some point there, the kind of the spans of control, there's just too much on one person's plate. So another way to help increase the frequency would be to delegate some of this responsibility for check-ins to some of the other team leaders at that agency.
That's great. So we had somebody actually slacked this over to me just now. How do I deal with the irrational guilt that I did something wrong as a leader? And, I'm going to appreciate that one because I felt it too. It's like we couldn't have planned for a pandemic. So any ways to cut ourselves a little slack?
Yeah, Zach, do you want to take that? Because I know we've talked about that quite a bit.
I was actually going to say, Tracy, do you want to take that one? I think that it is a constant coaching voice within each of us to, if you lead and act with integrity, we're all doing the best we can at the end of the day, right? Your team is hopefully doing the best that they can. I love Brene Brown talks about this. it's a better world that we can live in if we all can free ourselves up to knowing we did the best we could when we hired people. We tried to get the best people on our teams. We know they're doing the best we can, and I know I'm doing the best I can. It's not, don't burn yourself out. I know we're all working more hours than we were a month ago, probably. We've got a lot more weight and responsibility on us. We've got kids running around the house. I think you've just got to make sure that you're, in going back to what are you grateful for? Making sure that you're taking care of yourself, you're exercising, you're reading, you're using apps like Headspace to, meditate daily and get your head in the right space. And yeah, I know we're all dealing with guilt, and could we have made better decisions? Maybe, but I don't think any of us saw this coming. So I think that would be, at the end of the day, my advice. And I think too, your team is probably dealing with the same thing too: anxiety, guilt. My wife's a clinical therapist, and she was like, remind people of the LOVE acronym: listen, understand, and validate. Listen to what they're going through, help them understand that you understand it, you've got empathy for them, and validate it. Not every problem can be solved right now. Sometimes that listening ear is what people need.
And it goes back to like what I was talking about at the very beginning, like with human nature, we're going to go one direction or the other. So you're either going to sit in that fear and guilt, which are super natural, like it's it's just part of our nature, or you're going to go to self-actualization and engagement. You're going to pivot. So our first stop is going to be that bad stop, that stop in negativity or guilt, or that's just where we naturally go. But it's, can you pull yourself out of that to really see the reality of the situation in the right way? So just learn to quickly pivot and rewrite that script to get you out of that guilt. But it's not the first time we've heard that. No. We've heard that from a lot of owners. They wish they had a longer cash runway. I had somebody the other day say, I remember Jody saying in the owner camp that we're supposed to have this and I didn't do it. And you feel guilt. It's so natural, but you know what? It's what you do from this point forward. So it's not who you were yesterday. It's who you're going to be today and moving forward. You need to embrace.
Yeah, and I'd like to add another kind of wrinkle to go along with what Zach and Tracy said, is basically just don't waste this crisis, right? So there's no perfect leaders. Yeah, there's no perfect leaders. We all make mistakes, but here's the thing: we can only fix the mistakes we actually acknowledge and recognize. So in some ways, just own up that, what, I should have done better. That was a mistake. Recognize it, and then just move on and learn from it.
Yeah,
we do
I think
on the Q&A channel.
Yeah, just real quick before we shift over. I think, and this gets back, Zach, when you were saying headspace, one of the things that's helped me is just remembering that, that's something I'm thinking. That's not a reality. It's just a thought. I'm going to let that car pass on by. I'm not going to get in that car. And it's one of those things that's been so challenging, especially because I know my teams felt it as well, like y'all were saying. So it's one of those things also for us to just be able to communicate it openly. Has been great. So let's go ahead. Yeah, we'll get to the question in the channel here. Can you speak to people dealing with a more heightened emotional state than usual and lacking introspection? Like realizing the fact that stress is higher right now because of the apocalypse, the world's slowest apocalypse, in a time like this, specifically around how to navigate that journey. See what I did there?
Oh, love it. All right, boys. Zach?
Oh, Zach.
Good. I'll let Tom go first.
Tom's jumping in. Tom's like, he's ready to go.
Think of a better answer.
All right. So here, I'll go first. This is a big question. Completely get it. So, one little trick I have is ask people these two questions. First, what are you thinking? And then second, what are you feeling? And I think a lot of times in a workplace, when we do communicate, we definitely get things out. We usually are getting things out more along the thinking side of things, but there's rarely time, space made for what are you feeling? How are you feeling? And so that's a little trick that all three of us use. And it's often, and sometimes in an 8-hour day, when we ask those two questions back to back, it can reveal the most insightful things in an entire 8-hour day. So that's probably the first little tidbit I would give here, is that because the questions kind of talk about lacking introspection and things like this. So you've got to mine for that introspection. You got to ask people, what are you thinking? What are you feeling?
And I mean, this is, case in point, what Tracy was talking about. This is emotional intelligence and helping people navigate that skill set. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's panic, right? It's panic, it's grief, it's anxiety that's causing us to do this. And so the best advice I could give is slow down and learn to ask really good questions as a leader. Because what's happening, and I realize this is nerdery here, but like our limbic system is what's coming online when we're panicking. Fight, flight, or freeze. And that's, people who don't normally give that response, that's our body's way of dealing with a threat. So asking questions, slowing down helps get the thinking part of our brain back engaged, helping that come back online and helping them process a better response. But you've got to be there first as a leader to be able to do that. So learn to ask good questions, learn to slow down, learn to be really intentional about that space with team members.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I also say, when you're asking those questions, make sure you know that you've got the right tone. Because when you started, I could hear the love of my life saying, "What are you thinking?" Right? And so that's obviously not the intention.
She's not on a call, but
she's not. But I could absolutely, when you said that, I was like, I don't know. I'm trying to make it work.
Well, so yeah, but one thing I'll often say when I'm working with a team is I'll say to them, because sometimes you can just kind of detect something's going on, but it's just not being said, and I'll just say to them, I'm not a mind reader. You've got to tell me. And again, at this time, it's okay. I mean, really, at all times, it's okay to be asking these things. And again, in a work environment, there's so much running and gunning. As the leader, we just often convey that it's like we got so many other things to work on. We don't care about what you're thinking, feeling, your emotional state. So slow down, take the time to ask, show that you really want to go there.
That's great. So I've got another question that actually got slacked to me. We won a project today and everybody in the team is in a different situation. How do we celebrate a win when some people are in pain? And I know this individual, some of their team has COVID-19. So it's one of those things where they've got about 30 people, some of their teams in New York, some's in California, and they won a substantial project that's probably going to help the company, but they're obviously worried about how do they celebrate this knowing everybody's situation. That was a curveball.
I'm
sorry.
sure. Yeah, I'm gonna call Tracy out because I mean, you probably all know Tracy led for years at HGTV as a top exec. So you've got more experience than all of us here on this one.
Yeah. Well, I think it kind of goes back to what I was talking about as far as gratitude and celebrating the progress. I don't think anybody who's even going through a hard time or is suffering right now really wants to see their team or their company crash and burn. I think that they're looking for that silver lining, that glimmer of hope. And to hear that there are some things going okay. And I do remember this from, I went through the 9/11 crisis in corporate America. I went through the Great Recession in corporate America. I had over 150 clients dealing with, some huge multi-million-dollar budgets that were crashing, but yet some people were doing okay. So it's, certain industries were doing okay. And it was that fine balance of sort of navigating all the emotions. Again, this is why we keep coming back to emotional intelligence, is really understanding it's all in the delivery. It really is. And leaders learn how to deliver the messages properly, with compassion, but celebration. And you can balance those two things. And good leaders know and get coached on how to balance, the good news and the bad news, and how to enter into a situation and deliver the message well. The leaders that struggle the most have bad delivery. So if you need help in delivering your message, that's when you need to go out and get a coach or do a little reading, but learn and ask for feedback, because blind spots everybody else sees them, but you don't. So ask your colleagues, ask your teammates, how am I coming across? How'd that sound? Do I need to change? Do I need to flex a little bit differently here? But man, now's the time. Again, like I said, I know it's such a scary statement that you're going to be remembered and how you lead and influence during this crisis. But it's true, I saw it. And the leaders that I worked with through 9/11, I saw some people do some really bizarre, crazy things during that 9/11 period, and they could never crawl out from underneath it. So, you know, how you respond is very crucial.
Yeah, and that's got to be a really tough situation. But I think maybe kind of reframing it a little bit. So obviously not throwing some massive party for winning this project probably wouldn't be advisable. But I do think the messaging, though, to the people that do have in their agency that do have COVID-19, I mean, in part can be, when you get back to work, this company is still going to be here, and this is actually great news long term for the business that you all, when you recover health-wise, will come back into. So if I was sick at home with COVID-19, I think I would actually like to hear this news that we just won a great big project, because again, it's giving me that job stability that a lot of people in our country right now don't have.
Yeah, it actually takes one piece of uncertainty out of play.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
something to look forward to. That was excellent. So we have a few more questions that came in ahead of time, and we've got roughly 10 minutes left. So if anybody out there has a question, please throw it in the Q&A. And I want to ask this question next. And I think there's actually, I'm gonna add to it. I hope that's okay. But how do I deal with my team's constant fear that they're going to be laid off when I myself am not sure? And I think it wasn't in the original question, but I think that's an important thing. It's people are worried they're going to get let go, and owners right now aren't sure. And even more confusion with the SBA loans and all this stuff, so any idea how to deal with that constant fear and uncertainty?
Zach,
Tracy?
I'm going to toss to you because I know you actually been talking about this with some of your teams.
Yeah. Some of my clients, and I saw one of them. I've seen a number of them do this really, really well. Transparency, authenticity, win the day on this. Every single time. I mean, obviously, you don't want to create panic, but go. Talk about your pipeline, talk about, do a check of where you're at with clients and help them understand where you're at, help them understand your cash reserves. If everything were to stop today, how much longer could we go? Helping them just kind of understand, and hopefully you're doing this on a regular basis. This isn't, something new. But I think helping them understand where you stand as a business is really important right now. And, I think too, if you can say this with integrity, the first thing we're going to do is try to keep going. And we're trying to go after new clients and new business. And, I know there was a question that came in earlier on raises, but we can talk about that later. What are we doing in regards to salary increases, all of that kind of stuff, trying to preserve as much cash as possible during the scenario. And then talk about, like, what are we going to do if this happens, and how am I going to communicate? What are the things I'm going to agree to you? I think that's important, so that they know, one day you're not going to pop on Zoom and say you're laid off. If it gets to that point, what's the communication that's come ahead of that? Again, clear is kind. So I'm sure Tom, Tracy, you guys can add to that, but I've seen some clients do that really, really well. Just communicating where they're at, where their pipeline is at, and company-wise, financially, where they're at, where they think that they're going.
Mm-hmm. I think it's the balancing the brutal facts with the healthy optimism. Mm-hmm. And I think it goes back to, like, what Zach was saying about motives, like being transparent in the brutal facts, but saying, like, my hope is that we can all stay intact and that we all can carry through together. I want to come out the other side of this with everybody still in the boat. But that's going to take all of us, and I don't know, like, it's okay right now to say, I don't know how this is going to turn out. And we went through this at HGTV. Actually, one of the few layoffs I had to do was during the Great Recession. And I kept waiting to see if it was going to come down the pike. And that's what I kept saying is, like, my hope is nothing's going to happen, but I am not in control. I don't know. But, let's just focus on today. Let's focus on today, what we can do today. Here are my expectations. Let's carry out the mission together. So it's kind of that wartime leadership
Yeah.
where we're not sure if everybody's going to come out the other side of the battle, but man, let's go into it like we are.
That's great. Uh, it's interesting because obviously we're an organization, we're a business as well, like everybody else. And, you know, we had a conversation recently that was like, this is as far into the future as we can see that we know we're okay. Once we get to that point, we're going to have to take a look. But until then, let's just do our best. Let's keep working the work we've been doing. We've been having one of the best years we ever had, and this kind of sideswiped us. So let's just know that in a few weeks, we're going to look again. But until then, let's just keep charging forward. And it's challenging, but if you don't know answers and you don't know how to get them, I think you just have to keep moving forward, right? Eventually, things will reveal themselves.
Yeah,
Right.
that's so wise and true.
Oh, well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's go ahead. We've got time for this final question. It was one that Zach, you were just mentioning. What if I have team members who are doing great and are up for a raise, but I'm worried about money? And a caveat on this one is they haven't lost any work yet. So the team knows. So they're just, the owner is worried and kind of wants to hold back. So what do they do, these team members who are due for a raise?
You want to take this?
Well, here I'll go back to you, Zach. But here I'll just say something quick, then I'm going to go back to you. So I would say I would come at this from the perspective of the company, right? So right now, I think everybody's got to first protect the company, the agency as a whole, and I think that's what I would do is go back to these employees and go, I know we talked about a raise, you deserve a raise, all that, but with COVID-19 happening, I've also got a duty to protect the whole shop to make sure that we're here long term. So for right now, we're going to put this on hold till we get through on the other side. That's my quick answer. Zach, what would you add?
I would say, yeah, exactly that. I would hold off on it, and I would be transparent about why we're holding off on it. I maybe wouldn't say this, but if you can in 3 months, retro it back to when if everything stays on plan and life gets back to normal, retro it back if you can. Be generous, but be wise, be prudent, be smart about cash right now. Because what you don't want to do, and I was in this situation, I had a boss who trumped me on giving out raises, and we gave them out in December, and in June I had to lay 22 people off. And it looked silly. It was stupid that we had done that. And those were the 22 hardest conversations I've had in the course of my career, because those people didn't do anything to deserve that. And it was partially because of our financial irresponsibility at the highest level in the organization that we had to do that. So having lived through that and had to have those conversations, I would say hold off if you can, but be transparent about it. Be authentic, have the conversation. I wish we could do this. We're just going to try to be wise about cash right now. And here's why. And I hope to be able to give this to you in the future. And we'll revisit this in a month or 2 or 3, whatever the time may be.
That was great advice. Thanks, Zach. So we're coming up to the end. Any final words that y'all would like to share besides Godspeed?
Yeah.
Hang in there.
Hang in there. Yeah. And I think, again, just take a deep breath, and we're all in this together. Lean on each other, especially the Bureau community. And Carl, thank you for how you provide this community for all of us. It's a lifeline, and you will be remembered for being a lifeline during this crisis. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And thank you for saying it while it was recorded so I can show it to my mom. She'll be so happy. Seriously, thank you. I deflected that. I appreciate it. And thank you so much for sharing your expertise, sharing all the information, answering the questions today. Thank you, everybody who attended today. We'll be back on Thursday, where we're going to have a remote working Q&A with Jeff Robbins. So hopefully you can swing over for that. And until then, be good. We will get this video ready. And thanks again to MailChimp and Envision. They have been amazing. And we've also got a new sponsor showing up. So we'll be talking about that soon. Until then, stay safe. That's what we say now. And we'll see you soon.